Welcome back to the Bernard Lee Poker Show. We are very fortunate to have our guest this week. He's been on the show many times. You know his face very well. He is part of the PokerGo hosting team, not only for the WSOP, but also a lot of the shows internally, including the new one, No Gamble, No Future, which was introduced at the beginning of August of 2022. And we'll get to that, and we'll get to all the backgrounds and all the interesting stuff that's happened in the first few weeks in the second half of our interview. But let's talk with this gentleman about the 2022 WSOP and what his thoughts were. Welcome back to the show, Jeff Platt. Jeff, thanks for joining us once again here on the Bernard Lee Poker Show.
Bernard, always a treat to chat with you. How are you, my friend? You know, you always ask everybody else the questions. I want to know about Bernard Lee. How's Bernard Lee doing today?
Bernard Lee is doing well.
There we go.
We are enjoying kind of slowly emerging from the world of COVID.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the good news. Unfortunately, this new monkeypox thing is now freaking the world out like crazy, but we'll figure that all out as well. Poker was okay this summer, nothing fantastic like you had last year with a fourth place finish at the World Series. But my world, as some people know if they follow me on social media, has been swallowed up also by pickleball, which is crazy. So go to my YouTube site on pickleball, you'll find me there. But it's been crazy there. But I love it. I mean, it's been fun on all respects, and looking forward to getting back out onto the Run Good circuit and playing out there in Council Bluffs and San Diego. I know you're going to some of the Run Good events as well. And it was just announced that they are bringing back the ring. So I got to get me. I don't have a Run Good ring. I have three what they had discs, you know, those discs awards that they had way back with the medallions. So I have three of those, I'm pleased to say. But I don't have a ring. So now I got to go hunt and get one of those rings. Like you got to change the awards up all the time. So I got to now go get one of those. So
I'm with you. We're hunting at different stops. So we aren't going to run into each other. I'm in Tulsa and on the cruise and at Thunder Valley. So hopefully we can both acquire some rings without running into each other.
That's right. Then go to the Pro-Am and show them who the pros are, right?
That's right. That's right.
But we've been talking WSOP, we've been interviewing a lot of people, and in the coming months, we will be interviewing a ton of people, including more bracelet winners and the WSOP main event final table people as well, including Asher Conniff, who technically made the final table. He finished 10th during that long, crazy day. We'll be talking with him. Aaron Dusick from Canada, who finished in 7th. We'll talk with the winner, Espen Jorstad, as well. So all of those will be coming up. But before we get to that, you're the man. You're there. You're there all the time. You're talking, you're commentating, and really wanted to kind of get your take on the WSOP. We've had a lot of people on giving their opinions, how it was. I want to say that prior to the move, 17 years at the Rio, right? Prior to the move, there were people who were cautiously optimistic. There were people who were very skeptical. Chance Cornith was one who came on the show who said it's going to be a S blank show, right? He just didn't believe it was going to succeed in the transition. Other people were like, well, we'll see. And when it kicked off that Bally's was hotter than a sauna the first few days, people were like, here we go. But overall, I don't even say overall. Overall is not even the right word. To a person that I've talked to, people have been extremely pleased with the move, ecstatic that it's going to be there moving forward. Everything, whether it's food options, whether it's playing facilities, whether it's proximity to bathrooms, hotel rooms, etc. This is fantastic for the World Series. Now that I've said all that, I'd love for you to be like, no, it wasn't. No, but I'm just kidding. But what's your take? Like, kind of looking back, what do you think, from your opinion, the move from the Rio over to Bally's Paris?
Yeah, I think the World Series deserves an incredible amount of credit. And before I keep going, I'm not shilling for them. A lot of people are like, oh, you work for them. I don't work for the WSOP. I just work for PokerGo. And I think the World Series,
which is a very fine organization, by the way.
There we go. Now PokerGo, I will be happy to shill for it. We'll do that, Bernard, a little bit later, as you know. I just think it was a tremendous transition from Rio to Bally's in Paris. I think a lot of people thought that the logistics would indeed be difficult, but the World Series was working on this before even the 2021 World Series took place at the Rio. And Bernard, as you know by now, everything just worked. It just worked. It was like a seamless transition. Almost in our wildest dreams, we couldn't have thought that it would be that smooth. You run into some issues here and there, of course. I think most notably, and you pointed this out, was the lack of air conditioning in the Bally's Convention Center, which, not to shift blame to anybody or from anybody. That's just a Bally's issue. They work with a union. It takes a while. It's not like the World Series was sitting there and like, oh, we love that everybody's just dying of heat. Right. This is no problem for us. They were actively working on a fix, and it's just a union issue. And those things take some time. And besides that, it's really hard to think of one thing that went poorly. Of course, you're always looking to improve the playing experience for the World Series of Poker. And again, I just can't stress enough how good of a job that they did. And they also introduced the new horseshoe tables to try to enhance the spectator experience. I do think, Bernard, that more can be done as far as the live viewing experience is concerned. And to WSOP's credit, I reached out to them afterwards and shared a few of my thoughts on that. And they were extremely responsive, and they really want to create an engaging atmosphere for the live spectator. Whereas now, as you know, if you sit at the Thunderdome, sure, it's cool and it looks amazing, both in person and on TV. You can't really tell what's going on, especially without the announcer. But the WSOP, I think, is genuinely committed to improving that overall spectator experience. So again, I just give them rave reviews overall when it comes to the 2022 World Series.
Yeah, I was optimistic. Let's put it there. I don't think I was skeptical. I was optimistic, but a lot of people were complaining or concerned about the parking. First of all, for me, it wasn't a concern because I don't live there, so I didn't care. But the majority of the people who had that parking scenario said it actually wasn't as bad as they thought it was going to be. Definitely, it's more of an issue than at the Rio, but it's definitely not nearly what they thought it could be. I think for me, so for someone who, this is for people who do this, they stay there for a week or 2 weeks, right? Which I do usually. I stay usually for about 2 weeks, come home, do another 2 week stint. Sometimes I'll make 3 trips, but usually 2 long trips. For me, I like trying to get some food in my room so that I can just, if I want to have a yogurt, if I want to have a snack, if I want to have soda or whatever, even if I want to have like beer just sitting there, that it's just there. Well, obviously you got to go shopping, right? And so when you were at the Rio, I always had to borrow somebody's car, go to a shopping center, come back, and that was always like, it was always a burden. I always felt bad, but somebody would, shout out to Chad Holloway. He often let me rent his car, borrow his car, just kind of go. But you have CVS.
Yeah, right there.
This isn't pimping. This isn't pimping CVS.
No, they're doing fine.
But CVS right there, right? You have Target, which was literally just about a half a mile away, which I went to once. I went to CVS. You can get all the water you want. Is it a little bit more expensive than what a normal? Yeah, sure it is. It's on the strip. But it's a lot better than a $5 bottle of water like this, right? Where you can get like 12 waters, So that, for me, that was what was so great. I didn't have to borrow his car. I could just, literally, I remember one night at 10:30, I was like, I'm going to go get some stuff, and whatever, get a couple of salads, get this, you have the fridge in the room, etc. So that's the one thing and then if you did want to go out to dinner, it wasn't basically 4 restaurants that were packed to the gills and you're literally I remember writing a column saying one of the tricks is get one of your friends to leave 5-10 minutes before the break and run to the restaurant and get the table. What now? What are you kidding me? Like there's never an issue. Wherever it is, you could sit down, you can take out, and the options are incredible because where we are is Bally's Paris, Bellagio, Caesars, what's the one across the way that had Yada's place? I don't know. I'm
The
blanking.
Cromwell, yeah.
Yeah, Cromwell, of course, right,
Yeah.
right there. So there's just so many locations nearby. And if you want to walk 10, 15 minutes more, you could get there too. And so, and I think the other thing that's just amazing is I stayed at Bally's. I mean, I timed it from the Bally's floor of playing to my room. And I was not right off the elevator. I was down the hall 5 minutes. So I could go to the restroom.
Perfect.
And now I sit there and actually sit there for 10 minutes.
Can have a real break.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you go back down and you're back at the table. And usually they don't start literally on the second of 20 minutes. It'll be like 21, 22. You're fine. So I'm excited. And I don't know about you. When I went there, I was really worried, like, oh God, we're going to have to figure this whole thing out again. Right. Because it was Pavilion, Amazon room, Brasilia room, etc. You knew where to go. I was like, oh God, now I have to figure out where's this Paris, this and Bally. I walked around the first day and I was like, oh, I get it.
Good. Yeah.
Totally got it. I will say I didn't know the Thunder room until like day 2 or 3. Because
right. And that's what I really enjoyed about the whole experience is that for the most part, your big day ones would take place in Paris. And then if you made a day 2, you would, quote unquote, advance over to Bally's and play in that grand ballroom. And then the deeper you go, you advance again into the Thunderdome room known as the event center. And so it's almost like a video game with multiple levels. I think it was orchestrated really, really well. And to your point on parking, I do live in Vegas. Bernard, I swear I didn't have a problem finding a parking spot in the garage once, not one time. One time I had to go up to the roof and that was it. And you take the same elevator down regardless. That was it. No issues whatsoever, even on the busiest days of the World Series. Just a complete non-issue. And it was something that I was worried about going into it.
Yeah, so I mean, that's fantastic. I definitely will say, like, they probably need to definitely look at that because, as you say, as it gets to the roof, eventually there will be some issues with it. But
sure.
The first year, I mean, what an incredible transition from start to finish. And then also just being on the Strip, it is a difference. You know what I mean? Like, it's just such a difference that the vibe is there. And, knowing that you can walk to Bellagio, walk to this, walk to Aria, walk to Venetian, just kind of being in that atmosphere. So what Vegas has always been. And I think it's definitely been something missing. I think I always knew that when I was at the Rio, I would always make a couple of trips to the Strip for whatever reason, whether to go see a show or whether to have dinner or whatever, or people would be playing. I remember a couple of times some of my friends would be at Venetian and they would or Aria and they'd want breakfast and I would just walk. And people are like, well, it's hot. I go, yeah, but I just want to walk on the Strip. Is it really that bad up and down? So I think that it was definitely a fantastic transition. Really kudos to Jack Effel, Ty Stewart, and the entire team for doing what they did, especially during all of this COVID craziness, to do it and pull it off. Great job. I mean,
yeah. And I think credit to Caesars for just knowing that the World Series of Poker needed to have that presence on the Las Vegas Strip. Right. And I think it's going to be great when we show the episodes on TV and you see the layout of the entire Strip. You saw some of that in our live broadcast. And I think it's going to draw more and more people into this game when they can associate the World Series of Poker, not with the Rio, all due respect to the Rio, but when you can really associate the World Series with Las Vegas, Nevada, with the heart of this amazing city on the Strip.
Right. Yeah. No, it is fantastic. Congratulations to all of them. And I think they just did a great job. So definitely kudos. And I'm looking forward to seeing more and more there and see what else. They've talked about there's going to be more exciting stuff. We'll see what that all is. And so it'll be great. I mean, there are times literally I was playing and I forgot I was at Bally's Paris. Like it almost just seems almost so seamless. You just think you're kind of in the Rio, you know what I mean?
Except the lighting's a little better. That's it.
Yeah, well,
that's a little bigger.
Is true. Yeah, definitely. And it wasn't. The irony is, Bally's, it was so hot, but it wasn't frigid cold. I said to everyone, I said you could actually go to the store and buy a sweatshirt because in the years past they were all gone because everyone bought them all because it was so freaking cold. Right. You would and like wearing shorts was not a crazy thing.
No.
in the past, I couldn't wear shorts in the
No
down
chance.
there
No
because it was
chance.
so cold. But now I actually wore shorts, so it was good. It was good. Now that we've talked about the transition, let's talk a little bit about the events themselves. There were so many events, ranging from the employees event all the way down to the Tournament of Champions, and so many great stories with regards to it. Any stories for you that kind of stick out in your mind?
I'd say there are probably two when I look back at when we put the main aside, because the main obviously has 5 to 10 storylines within that one tournament.
Right.
Number one for me, Bernard, is probably Dan Smith winning his first bracelet.
Mhm.
And, he's one of the best poker players in the world. And he was
Right.
certainly on top of the list of best players to have never won a bracelet. He did it in such a prestigious event too, all due respect to the others, but winning that first one in the 25K heads up championship, I think is something special. And you can tell that it really meant something to him. And that was cool.
Right.
And, the money's great. Of course, he wins a couple $100,000. To Dan Smith, it's probably not that big of a deal, but I think he was really touched by winning a World Series of Poker bracelet. And I thought that was cool that he wasn't over it by any means. He doesn't look down at World Series of Poker bracelets. He really appreciates it for what it is. And that it's something special. And then number two for me, Bernard, would undoubtedly be the success of the mystery bounty. And I think the World Series and GG deserve a tremendous amount of credit for putting that together. And they pulled that off seamlessly as well. And for a field of, what was it, like 14,000 entries or so to run that tournament in the way they did. And I just think it was so exciting. It created this aura, this atmosphere within the World Series that is unlike anything that we've ever seen before. So those are the two main storylines that really stand out to me.
Yeah, you talk about Dan Smith. What's interesting is the last couple of years, someone who was on that list, the list that we say, the dubious list of best player having never won a bracelet. Well, Jason Kuhn did the same thing in 2021. He won
in the heads up
first
championship.
one. Yeah, exactly. That's my point. Like that same event, they won it. And so it's really cool that event is kind of like letting that person in such a prestigious event, such an event that really is a special skill set, to have these players who are on that list get it is really something special, I think, and I think that's really great. Story for me was Alex Livingston, winning his 7-card stud event, final tabled the 2019, finishing in 3rd place, and he wins a bracelet, and it was something very special to him to win that bracelet. I remember seeing that name and going like, whoa, that was great. I interviewed him, and he'll be on my show later on this year talking about it as well. And we'll talk more about the main event too, but I think Jamie, one of your counterparts, Kerstetter, getting heads up in the tag team event. I don't think there was an event that more people were cheering for one side than the other. And that's just because, not that they were all her friends there, which there were a lot of. I'm just saying that there are a lot of people knew her and wanted her to win. And what a interesting weave of tales where Jesper Jorstad and Patrick Leonard win the event. And wouldn't you know it, Espen ends up going on to win the main event. I mean, that's crazy, to be honest. But the event that really captured me in the sense of what he did as a personality, which, to be honest, I don't really think is his real true personality. But for him to do it in such an event where people will talk about this, this is starting to rank up there with the Adam Friedman 3-time Dealer's Choice 10K championship. Dan Cates winning the Dealer's Championship 2 years in a row. They talk about Mizrahi winning it 3 times. This guy just won it 2 years in a row, and had the balls to be Randy Macho Savage there. Dan's got his personality, but I don't think that's his true, real kind of personality coming through. For him to win that back to back is, really incredible, in my opinion. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think so too. I think undoubtedly that's one of the most impressive accomplishments that maybe we've ever seen in the poker world. I know you know this, but just in case some of your listeners don't, the 50K Poker Players Championship, that draws the best field of the year, the best players in the world. To win that event once is an amazing accomplishment. To do it back-to-back times is simply absurd. And that just cements Jungle's status as one of the very best in the world. And for me personally, Bernard is great as a WWE fan and always wanting to be like a WWE reporter, to get to interview Jungle, Macho Man Dan, whatever he wanted to be known as. That was a real treat. And I think that it helps because, I mean, we know this, mixed games are great. They aren't the most entertaining to watch on TV, right? I mean, there's a reason that No Limit Hold'em is the most popular form of poker that's broadcasting. But when you get to tune in and see Macho Man Dan really put on a show throughout, right, I think that incentivized the audience to kind of stick with this long and grueling tournament where every hand wasn't necessarily the most exciting, but you knew you were in for a treat because you got to see Macho Man Dan.
Right. We were talking with Jeff Platt, host of PokerGo, and we're talking about the 2022 WSOP. And I would say my final story is kind of a little bit personal because he's such a good friend of mine as well, but also the emotion behind it. Eli Eliezer wins his fifth bracelet over Chino Reem. And just to put it into perspective, he wasn't there for some of the WSOP because his father passed away about 18 days prior to his win. So he was at home in mourning. And the day that he wins this bracelet was his and his wife's 31st anniversary for their wedding. And she was there at the rail for him to win the $10,000 pot limit Omaha high-low 8 or better championship. It's just, a really nice story, to put it all together. I think about it a lot. You've been in media for so long. Every single time you have a final table or whatever it might be, you can write a story about every single person, right? I've done this for, when we had the November 9, I was tasked to write a story about pretty much every November 9er. There was one year where I wrote, I think, 7 of the 9 stories. So you have to you have to create a story off of their backstory. So in essence, every single person can have that story, right? And so when the story does appear, all the 8, it's not like this person had the only story. It might have had the best story, but there's other stories there. But it's so great when that story comes together like this for Ellie. And I was so happy for him. I texted him immediately, and he was just so pleased with the result, but pleased really kind of for his dad and his wife. And it was a great story.
Well, he's one of the best, as you know. And let me tell you a quick Ellie story. A couple months before the World Series, I should say, I went to Israel with my family, and I'm walking through the streets of Jerusalem, and some guy cuts me off. And, my head was down. And so I just tried to walk the other way. And the same guy cuts me off again. What is this guy doing? I look up, it's Ellie. It's Eli Eliezer. And, we both live in Las Vegas. So the chances of us to be in Israel at the same time, even though he's from there originally, and to be walking the same street in Jerusalem was absurd. And at that time, I swear to you, Bernard, he tells me, he says, I saw you in 2019. I think we were at the Bahamas for the PokerStars Players Championship. And I told you that year I was going to win bracelet number 4. And I did. I said, yeah, that's true. And he said to me there in Israel a couple months ago, Bernard, he said, this year, I guess I'm going to win bracelet number 5 after seeing him. I'm like, yeah, okay, I guess you will. And then he just wins the 10K PLO8. So it's awesome. I mean, you said it. He's just one of the class acts, one of the great guys. And I think poker is very lucky to have him.
Yeah. And obviously inducted into the Poker Hall of Fame last year, 2021. This year, Lane Flack entered. A great nominee. I think it's definitely a good one. Obviously, that entire list. I just wrote a column in Cardplayer with regards to it, of saying this is great. All these nominees are fantastic, but of the 9 that we have here, and then if you go backwards in time of the last 5 years, there are, I think, another 11 who have been on the list and now kind of come off.
Right.
So therefore, you have 20 people on that list that are fully capable of being put into the Poker Hall of Fame. But because we're only doing one a year, it is, in my opinion, we're just never going to get rid of the backlog. Now, here's the problem, and I wrote this in the column. Moneymaker was 2003. Next year's the 20th anniversary. Guess what? There are a lot of 20-year-olds who are going to turn 40-year-old and now going to be capable. Justin Bonomo, Isaac Haxton, Scott Seaver, Sean Deeb, Maria Ho, Jason Mercier. I mean, by the way, I have a list of all these players. What are you going to do? Like have Jason Mercier 10 years later? I mean, here's my personal opinion. Michael Mizrahi should be in the Hall of Fame. He's one of those guys that I really think is that first-time nominee, first-time ballot guy. This isn't discrediting Lane Flack and Ellie Alezra by any stretch. They deserve it. But my fear is that we're going to get so backlogged if we continue this path that it's just not going to be good. And so, and then with regards to contributors, forget it. Like, it's not fair that Matt Savage isn't in, right? I mean, Matt Savage deserved to be in a long time ago. So anyway, if people haven't seen it, go to Card Player. You'll see my column. I've introduced a different take on it. A, it should be 2 a year. B, we need to get rid of this backlog, at least initially. And maybe the moneymaker year would be a good year, 20th anniversary. Let's get rid of some of this backlog and maybe induct 7, because that's what was the first year, the initial year. And then I created 3 different categories. 1, OUS. There's only like, I think 8 players in the 60-61 that are outside of the US. And that's not right. There are so many Europeans. Why is Joe Hashem not even being nominated? Like things like that. I think over 55, there should be an elder category, because what's going to happen in about 5 years is
they'll get pushed up.
They're just going to get pushed back, right? And I'll give you a perfect example. And this is not, and Mike, if you're watching this show, I swear to you, I'm not discrediting you. You know me. I'm a good friend of yours. I'm not discrediting you. But what's going to happen is Mike Matusow is going to slowly get pushed off because you're going to get these other younger kids coming in. This is not saying that they're better than Mike. It's just people have what they remember today, and they're going to remember those. And Mike's going to slowly get put, and that's not fair.
And then you're
because
done.
After right, and then you're pushed off, and then now. So that's why it's this, what they have in baseball. I've taken a lot of the ideas from baseball, is that they have this old timers committee. 55 is not old timers, but it's just an older branch. And I said that if you're nominated X number of times, then you should be put into that category to be considered separately. And then I think the other category is the contributors. Yeah. Right.
Savage, Lana Norman, stuff like that.
Exactly. And they're not going to, because people are going to think of players first. And I actually put in the Savage rule, right? So they have the Chip Reese rule. You got to be 40.
Yeah.
Well, the youngest ones in the contributors category, I think, were Linda Johnson and somebody else. And they were like in their late 50s, early 60s. Well, Matt Savage was 54 this year. God willing, he gets in next year. Then he'd be 55. Well, then I think that the contributor rule should be 55. You should not get in until you're 55, or Matt Savage rule, right? The Matt Savage rule, until you're that age, because you can't be a contributor at 42. Like, as a contributor, you really need to contribute, right? And that's got to be for X number of years, 10, 15, 20 years, because it's a contribution thing. So I look at it that way. So again, people may disagree. I hope the World Series of Poker isn't mad at me for making those suggestions, but I think that that's something that we just have to consider as we move forward, because it is too elite of a club to not allow some people in just because of the way that it's structured. It really needs to have a few more people. And I don't think the difference of 60 and 80 is going to make that much of a difference. It's still an incredibly elite club. Yeah, I agree with you. If I gave you the resumes blind, I didn't put any names on top of them, of 10 to 15 people who are about to turn 40, and you looked at those 10 to 15 resumes, you would say deserving of Hall of Fame, deserving of Hall of Fame, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that just is going to create this enormous backlog, even more than it already is. So I'm with you. And then add the 10 to 15 to 20 players that are already now who have been nominated that are the same thing. So now you're creating 20 to 30 to 40 people. Even if we did one a year from now, forget the 40-year-olds. If we did one a year for the next 15 years, we already have it. We have 15. But then there's 10 to 20 of these 20-year-olds coming in through something's got to be done. It really does. Or else it's just then it's just going to be a farce if Jason Mercier at 55 still hasn't gotten in. Right. Can you imagine that? I mean, are you kidding me? Should be an absolute first ballot Hall of Famer lock. Right. And really could not get in at the first. Exactly. Because, like I said, I believe, again, I personally believe Michael Mizrahi should have been. I think he's one of those people, like, you know, the Phil Ivies, the Daniel Grounds. I get it, but I actually think that Michael Mizrahi, he changed WPT for a while, Poker Players Championship 3 times. I mean, he is that person that I think definitely deserves it. And in all honesty, right now, this was his second year of eligibility. He didn't get it. If you look at that list, and if we were to do one every single year, based off of how it's voting, no media, by the way, it's only the players in there.
Right.
I don't see Mike getting in for the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah,
and that's not Mike. If you're watching this, Michael Mizrahi, you know, I'm the one that's saying I think you should have gotten in potentially 2 years ago. That's not saying Ellie shouldn't have. I'm just saying that I think you should have. So again, I think that hopefully they'll take a look at that. So anyway, we'll get off our soapbox right now. Boom. And we'll continue. But when we come back, we're going to talk more with Jeff Platt about the new show on PokerGo, No Gamble, No Future, when we return here on the Bernard Lee Poker Show.